Hello everyone, my name is Malleo, and welcome back to another video. Today I'd like to discuss the latest lead we have on a new method of performing palace skip. Palace skip has always been the holy grail in TTYD speedrunning history, and through the years it's seen several new variations which save more and more time. I also plan to make a video discussing and showing off all the known variations of palace skip to give you all a good understanding of its development over time. And if I do make that video, I'm happy to say I have a new entry for that. Just a few days ago, on March 26th, with the help of Vaniv, I managed to pull off a slight variation of palace skip. I first get text storage with a delayed Goombella buffer, push Yoshi out of bounds, and Yoshi teleport to get Mario out of bounds. From there, I maneuver on the front seam and set Koops up in the middle of the room as close to inbounds as I can. Then I navigate around the left loading zone and get on the other side of the door. Then when an Emperor gets close to Koops, I jump upwards towards the corner of the room and enter a battle midair. After leaving the battle, I can perform a double jump to the right and land on the back seam of the room. This method successfully skips one fight, which may mean a few seconds can be saved for the task. This method won't be viable for RTA runners though. Sadly, this is only a small time save, but hopefully history continues to repeat itself as PistonMiner, Zephiles, and SolidifiedGaming have been theorizing an all-new type of exploit for TTYD. This is unlike any glitch theory I've ever heard of for this game, and it may just work. What if I told you we have successfully found a way to, under certain circumstances, grant Mario the ability to walk through walls? This is the EFF Overflow, and it just might lead to a revolutionarily faster palace skip method. As it stands currently, palace skip requires Yoshi. An exploit was found with Yoshi that allows you to warp to the same height as Yoshi. This can be used to fall beneath the floor of the Palace of Shadows and land underneath by a loading zone. After opening the chest in this room, the game advances to a later sequence, reveals the room underneath, and allows the player to reach Grotus much earlier than intended. This is great and all, but as speedrunners we strive to go faster. Since this method requires Yoshi, it means that we have to go out of our way to obtain Yoshi in Glitzville. By extension, this means we need to perform Blimp Ticket Skip, and in order to set up Blimp Ticket Skip, we have to go to Poshley Heights and obtain jump storage, use jump storage to get the Garnet Star, complete the long intermission, and finally perform Blimp Ticket Skip. That's quite the mouthful, but as that suggests, it's a very long process to get all conditions just right to reach Chapter 3 and grab Yoshi. In total, it takes about 25 minutes for us to grab Yoshi and return to Rogueport, all so that we can use Yoshi to perform Palace Skip. If we found a way to perform Palace Skip without Yoshi, then we would have the next holy grail of time savers on our hands, and we just might have a strong theory to pull that off. On screen, you can see that I'm making use of a debug menu of sorts. These are the TTYD practice codes, and you can use them to display all sorts of things like individual memory addresses, modify your item and badge inventories, and so on. To check it out, visit Zephiles' GitHub repository to download and install for yourself. They make practicing TTYD much easier and faster. Through these practice codes, I can display what are called EFFs. EFFs, short for effects, can be thought of as the equivalent of particle effects on more modern game engines. There are a whole bunch of EFFs, such as the Dust When Mario Walks, Flurry's Wind ability, and Bobbery's Explosion. Also on screen is a region of the game's memory that EFF data is stored to. It's important to keep track of the memory usage in this region for later. Each EFF that is loaded is associated with a 40-byte long entry in an entry table, and the game allocates a memory region to allow for 256 EFFs in the Japanese version and 512 EFF entries in the US and PAL versions. For the purpose of simplicity, I'll just be focusing on the Japanese version. The most significant part of each entry is the last field, the effect's name, and I'll get to why it's important in a bit. When an EFF occurs, a routine determines where the next free entry is. It looks at the beginning and iterates until it finds the next open entry, However, if the entire table is traversed without a free entry being found, the routine will return the address of where the next entry would be if the table were big enough. This routine does not account for the possibility of all entries being filled, thus, it will try to store the new EFF entry at this invalid memory location. What will happen when this new EFF is written to memory? This is an example of an overflow. An overflow occurs when data is written past the normally intended point in memory. In our specific scenario, the address that the routine spits out normally isn't accessible through EFF entries, so we can start to write data to this invalid memory address. Well, what data gets modified? There are several other regions of memory that could theoretically have overflows, in which we may be able to change what function a region of memory points to, allowing us to jump to, say, the credits right away, but that's much more abstract and farther out of our reach right now. The reason we choose to focus heavily on EFFs is because of what's located in memory right after EFFs, Mario's data. After a 32-byte header, Mario's data structure contains several different flags, such as whether he's in tube mode and whether he can only walk left and right, like when he's in the background of a room. But most importantly, there's a flag that determines whether or not Mario can walk through walls. This flag is located at the third byte in Mario's structure at the third least significant bit. When this is set to 1, Mario can walk through any and all walls. It may seem silly that the game actually has a flag that allows you to walk through walls, but it's actually present because of Vivian, since this flag allows Mario to get past sliding walls. There's a small complication that I'll get to later, but setting this flag would allow us to perform Palace Skip by simply walking out of bounds. So, how can we set this flag? The first requirement is that we need to reach 256 out of 256 EFF entries. We currently know of 2 ways to stack EFFs. The first method is using Flurry and entering a pipe while activating her. There's an EFF associated with her wind, and if we enter the pipe while using her, this EFF is never unloaded. We can stack up as many EFFs as we want until the game crashes at around 112 EFFs. Even though her EFF entries are still only 40 bytes each, the actual data that the EFF entry represents is 1.12 kilobytes in size when loaded into memory. As a result, we run out of space in memory to store data, and the game crashes. The second method we know of is by using a boat panel and falling out of bounds. When we respawn, the EFF for boat mode is never unloaded, meaning we can repeat this and generate 256 EFFs. If we generate enough EFFs with boat mode and enter a battle and use power lift, we can run from battle and walk through walls, though there are some issues with this. Let's go more in depth as to what's actually happening when we fill up the entry table and enter a battle. It's important to mention that as long as there are 256 out of 256 EFFs in the entry table, all subsequent EFFs are always written past the end of the entry table. Right off the bat, you'll notice when we walk around, there aren't any dust effects. And most notably in battle, if we use a special ability, no EFFs can spawn. It is important to note, however, that the EFFs still attempt to spawn and are loaded in memory. Because there's no corresponding entry for these EFFs in memory, since the entry table's filled up, they are not able to be despawned, causing a memory leak. Over time, EFFs that are not inserted into the entry table will remain in memory. Even if you leave a room, these EFFs will still take up memory, so memory can only be freed if you reset the game. We can use 2 EFFs to modify data a bit farther beyond this address. Recall how I said EFFs have a name field? Most EFFs actually do not write a name in their entry, and it's instead left blank. However, in the case of the Palace Skip room, we have 2 easily accessible EFFs that have names that can write the flags to our liking. Before I go on, it's important to mention that the names are stored in memory using ASCII, which is an encoding standard used to represent text as a series of bits. For ASCII characters, English letters are represented in a range of values between 0100, 0001, and 0111, 1010. As such, it can be hard to manipulate the leftmost bits, but luckily the flag we care about the most, walking through walls, is one of the rightmost bits, so we won't have trouble manipulating it. The first easily accessible EFF with a useful name occurs when you select a special ability. Its name is SAC_item_get. If we have a full entry table of 256 out of 256 EFFs and we spawn this EFF, it's written starting at Mario's header. The first 24 bytes of this EFF are written to memory. From that point onward, the name is written to memory. For the special ability EFF, the name is written in the next 11 bytes. When this data is written, it overwrites flags within Mario's structure. Specifically, it sets the following flags: invisibility, background movement, carrying bobbery, and most importantly, ignore wall collision. This correctly sets the flag to allow us to walk through walls. But there's one tiny, gigantic problem. This set the background movement flag, which means Mario can only move left and right. This doesn't help us much if we need to move up towards the loading zone, so we have to do better. We can then use another EFF to overwrite data in a portion of Mario's structure. This time, we can use an EFF with a shorter name such that the name ends early enough to modify the background flag, yet doesn't reach far enough to touch the ignore wall collision flag. Luckily, a mystery item uses the name EFF Naniga, and it's just short enough to avoid overwriting the bit associated with walking through walls. When we use the mystery, the background mode flag is disabled, thus allowing us to move freely around the room. Now, in this state, we actually can't activate doors, nor can we activate loading zones, like the one we need to access to actually perform palace skip. Finally, we have one more trick up our sleeve. We need to save while out of bounds and reload our file in order to fall below and trigger the loading zone. Seemingly, because of the carrying bobbery flag, we can actually float in midair by alternating between a direction and neutral on the analog stick every other frame. We can enter a battle midair by using coops to hit the ember while jumping. Once we leave the battle with the flag set, we can then float and walk into the save block while out of bounds. When we save, our coordinates are stored and we will respawn within the wall. From there, our flags are reset and we can simply walk along the seam of the room and land into the loading zone below. Thus, this completes palace skip much faster by, hopefully, negating Yoshi and any EFFs pertaining to Yoshi. This is the next holy grail, and I feel that it's within reason that we keep it in mind in the near future as the TTYD speedrun becomes more and more optimized. Hopefully my explanation for this trick did enough justice for this incredible glitch theory. As it stands, this is just a theory for palace skip. We currently do not know of a way to get a full EFF entry table in the palace skip room. As long as we find a way to continuously load EFFs without them unloading, and without taking up too much memory, then we can undoubtedly grant Mario the ability to walk through walls and thus perform palace skip. Though, with the persistence of the glitch hunting community for TTYD, I don't doubt that it'll happen soon. Thanks again to PistonMiner, Zephiles, and SolidifiedGaming on their in-depth research in these data structures. And lastly, thanks for watching.